We're Sue Aldis and Debbie Smith.
And we are co-founders of the Canadian Sidesaddle Alliance. We developed this club about 5 years ago to educate riders in the proper way of doing sidesaddle. We found that there was too much misinformation on the internet, and which was not beneficial for people trying to get in and doing sidesaddle properly. So we developed the club. We specialize in education for all levels of riders, but good education that you need, that you can go out, you'll be able to buy, you'll be able to see a saddle and know if it's the right one for you. And we can also put you in touch with instructors all over Canada. So wherever this goes, you'll be able to access instructors. This is terrible. So we'd like to start by showing the saddle. This is a side saddle. It's roughly 1920s. They stopped making side saddles roughly around the 50s. It really fell out of popularity around the 50s. And this saddle is a whippy. It's one of the higher end side saddles made in Britain around the turn of the century. And this one's a bit later model. It's got two pommels, the leaping head and the top pommel. The top pommel is where your right leg goes around for the purchase, which we will show you in a minute. You've got a stirrup on the left side. You've got an overgirth here that goes down under the horse and does up on the other side to keep your flaps down. So in this video, we are hoping to show you why you would ride side saddle in the first place, the basics of riding side saddle, through showing you the saddle, the parts, the rider on the saddle, proper position, proper fitting of the saddle to the horse, which is very important when it comes to a side saddle. And we'll try and answer questions along the way that we've been asked in prior seminars and lessons as to different aspects of side saddle riding. Okay, so let's start by I just wanted to mention that the side saddle fell out of favor with women approximately the end of the Second World War. Women were totally on their own. They wanted to be independent. They wanted to ride like men, and the side saddle lost its appeal. It was brought back by two ladies in Britain in the 70s, and they have grown. They started the SSA in Britain, and it is now grown. They just had their 50th anniversary, so we have them to thank for it. It also came over to the States in the 70s, and one of the oldest side saddle associations in the States, the International Side Saddle Organization, they started it going in the States. So the side saddle has had a resurgence of people. It's just a fun thing to do. It has a certain mystique, these saddles. It's really it's known as the Saddle of Queens, and it certainly is. So we're going to start, now that you know what a good saddle looks like, the parts of the saddle. I'm going to ask Sue to get on the saddle, and we're going to go through some proper positioning of the rider to the horse. Always, these saddles must be mounted with a mounting block. You cannot mount them from the floor or the ground, or back of a pickup truck or something, because it will pull the saddle off balance. These saddles are asymmetrically balanced. It comes from the near side to the off side because of the way you're positioned on the saddle. And so you must use a mounting block in order to get on these saddles. So
let's demonstrate. Usually it would be a groom, hopefully a handsome one, and he'd be giving you a leg up, and you would take your habit out of the way so you can get up, sit down, and then swing a leg around like so.
And then you would pick up your stirrup. That's where the handsome groom comes in to help you with your stirrup. And straighten yourself on the saddle. Just bring this hip a little bit further back so you are facing forward. This is a total misconception when people look at us and watching us ride. They don't realize that we're facing forward. We are. We're not facing sideways. We're facing forward.
This is my groom. He's a little short. So you take your habit, you move it out of the way, either side. You mount just like a regular saddle, sitting square in the middle, and then bring a leg over. So, and then your instructor will correct your posture.
Okay, so we've got the knee here. We've got your foot down on the shoulder of the horse, your toe slightly down. You will feel it in here. You'll feel the pull in here, pulling you down into the saddle. You should be able to get one hand's length or one hand span underneath the leaping head. If you have a problem, you need to be locked in like a bucking horse or something along those lines. Typically a lady rides a very lovely horse that won't do that, but just in case you get one, then have her foot in the stirrup. She'll raise her foot up in the stirrup, and she will be locked in under the leaping horn. Her ankle will be pushed against the shoulder of the horse. Her knee will be pressed against the top pommel, and she is virtually locked in. There's not any way for her to go. Ideally, there's not any way for her to go. The only horse that you would get involved with in trouble is a rearing horse, and ideally, ladies in Sidesaddle should not be riding rearing horses.
What do you do about the missing leg on this side?
It will feel more like your leg, and the horse will be less likely to get upset with the whip, especially if your horse isn't used to you carrying a whip when you're riding astride. One thing I will say is, I know people love costuming, and we are going to show you a proper habit, both English and Western. But right now, if you're just schooling, this is totally appropriate for a schooling session. You don't need a habit. You don't need fancy clothes. Just for doing this, if you want to go into, if you want to show, then you'll need a habit. But for just right now, this is all we want. This is all you need to ride in.
We're going to show you the way the rider sits in a side saddle from all angles, so you can see you aren't parked on the side of a horse like you would be had you thrown your leg over the side of your regular saddle, like we've all tried before.
Now we're looking at the rider from the back, and as you can see, she's perfectly balanced through the back. The seam of her breeches goes right down through, and this is the center of the horse, and there's the gullet of the saddle. Now these saddles sit a little higher on the left side than the right, and you want to see that before you get on the saddle. That if you'll see that, then you know that the saddle will balance properly when it's on the horse. You can see how lovely and straight her back is, and she is facing forward. Okay, now we're looking at the rider from the off side, and you can see the lovely straight back, the length of thigh, ideally along the horse's spine, and it will cross over just behind the withers. You can see the saddle on this side. This is a balance girth. It comes down, it crosses over, it comes under the horse against the girth, and it does up on the other side. There's a special buckle for this to do up on the near side. That strap helps to stabilize the cantle of the saddle when you're riding. Now you see the rider from the near side. I'm just going to go back for a minute to just briefly discuss girths that you use with the side saddle. Never ever use an elastic ended girth with a side saddle. Ideally, the best girths for a side saddle are the old-fashioned 3-fold girths. You cannot have these saddles moving. You need that girth to hold it properly. And you will see that there's under Sue's leg, there's an over girth. It comes down and it goes down and around and up the other side, and it's to keep the flaps down. So now we've seen a lot of very terrible positions in a rider, so we're going to go through a couple of them. If she was in a saddle that was too long, she would not be hitting the sweet spot of the saddle, and it does have a sweet spot. So ideally, that you should have 3 inches between the rider and the cantle of the horse. The thigh comes down, the leg goes straight down. The toe is slightly down, which helps to pull your leg. The leg comes along, it comes down, it should ideally cross just behind the withers of the horse. It comes down horizontally. One of the biggest problems we've seen with riders riding side saddle is they ride with their leg up halfway up the horse's shoulder, or even like that. You cannot get your purchase on a side saddle without it being perpendicular to the ground. When it's perpendicular to the ground, her ankle is pushed into the shoulder of the horse, her thigh is pushed up against the top pommel, and that's how you get your purchase. Another problem that we've seen with riders is they jam themselves up under the leaping head. Ideally, you should only have, and this is perfect, you should only have one hand underneath the leaping hand for space. That gives you, you're able to lift your leg and push it underneath the leaping head when you have a problem. If you get into, even if you're riding in rough terrain.
Now the shoulders are also likewise important, because tell the ladies about the death spiral if your shoulders aren't right.
We call it the death spiral because if Sue started to turn this way, she is literally unlocking her legs, and she can go off the offside. So it's very, very important. Even if you reach down and grab your balance strap on the offside to keep your right shoulder back, it will keep you level and balanced on the horse. Side saddles ideally fit differently from astride saddles. That's why you can't just throw your leg over the front of your astride saddle and have it work. They fit approximately 4 inches higher off the horse's back.
And they sit farther back on the horse too than we're used to looking at. However, when you look at the rider's weight, it is still seated over the horse's rib cage and at the front of the horse, not on the rump. So a good side saddle, when you're looking for side saddles, please don't go to eBay or look online. There are many, many imports from India and other parts of the world where they've seen a picture of a side saddle and they've just stuck on heads on a regular stride saddle. So here's how you can figure out whether it was built as a side saddle and whether it'll work as a side saddle. Look under the hood.
Okay, so as I said before, the side saddle is asymmetrically stuffed. Now, a lot of these saddles are so old that it's difficult to stuff them. Therefore, you need shims. But you can find a reputable person to help shim your saddle. Don't want to get too many shims under it because it can destabilize the saddle again. But for the most part, this side,
Let's see.
this side,
You might be able to see
there you
this
go.
away.
You can see there's more padding under your right hip and less under your left hip. that helps to balance and stabilize the rider.
Okay. We have what's called the long point here, and you will see that in specifically made side saddles. Whereas if you're looking at an astride saddle that's been butchered to make a side saddle to take your money, you won't see that. Both sides will look like the underside of a normal side saddle.
Mm-hmm.
The only exception here is in Western side saddles where they're built on a Western tree, and we will show you that as well. So this is the biggest giveaway, is the long point and the short point.
Which helps to balance the saddle on the horse's back. Please, we deplore you. Please do not go to eBay and pick up a saddle for $300 because it is a total waste of money. It's going to hurt your horse's back. It's not going to be in the right position for the rider. Therefore, the rider's going to be very uncomfortable, and you've just wasted $300 on a very inferior saddle.
And they're dangerous.
And they're dangerous. There are still saddles, there are still good saddles out there, and there are people that can point you toward a good saddle. You will probably be looking in a range of between $2,000, $2,500 for a good British-made saddle. And there's been a lot of other saddles made. At the turn of the century, just about every saddler could make a side saddle, both in Britain and the States. And a lot of good ones came out of that. It's these ones that have been imported in the last 30 years from European countries that are being a problem for us right now.
So this is the English saddle. We will show you the Western saddle in just a moment.
As you can see, this Western saddle has all the attributes of an astride Western saddle. The lovely tooling, the leather-covered stirrup, the suede seat. On the opposite side, okay, let's turn it right. On the off side of this saddle, you'll see a pouch, very often a pouch or a pocket of some sort. That was typically when the saddles were used on the frontier by the ladies that were following their husbands on cattle drives. That would have been for gloves, it could have been for change, anything along those lines. So that is typical of a good Western saddle with a proportioned pouch on the off side.
Okay, we'll talk about the tree in a moment, because, as I promised, it's going to be different than the English tree. And here we are.
As you can see, the tree on the Western saddle is a bar tree, which is very similar to the Western astride saddles. The difference in this is there's very little padding on these. This has a shearling padding, like a good Western saddle, and the tree is solid. The balancing on this particular saddle comes from the seat, and you've got to have a very knowledgeable saddler that can build up the left side of the seat in order to have you completely comfortable in it.
You can see it sits square on the horse. I'll get in it in a moment, and you can see I sit square in the saddle on the horse.
And you can see that the off side again is slightly higher than the near side, and when the rider gets on, it will balance it out and make it level. It's absolutely imperative with both the Western and the English saddles that the rider sits level. If the rider is sitting uphill, it's going to be really hard on your back and your knees, and on both of these saddles. Now, this saddle tends to be a little more secure. People like this saddle more because there's more saddle than the English saddle seats, and it feels more secure. So again, you'll see with Sue sitting in the saddle, she's completely centered in the saddle. The saddle has centered out so that it's now level from side to side. And you can see the mark, the center mark on our horse is exactly over the center of this saddle. That's the only way that you can ride these saddles successfully. This saddle is what we call a thoroughbred tree. Ideally, most of these older saddles were meant to go on a thoroughbred type horse. And you can see when this saddle is properly sitting on the horse, it's completely level. Now you'll see when I pull it back, now the seat's going down. That's going to sit the rider up. It's going to be very uncomfortable. The same with having the saddle too far forward. You're going to be coming up, sitting up the saddle, and again, that's going to be very uncomfortable. So it's imperative that you get a saddle that fits your horse's shoulder. And it's difficult at times because of the heavier breeded horses that we're using now for side saddle. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the dress, which unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, this is what people are drawn to side saddle for. The elegance of the English attire, which Sue is wearing now, it's comprised of a jacket, much like a stride jacket. It has what we call an apron with it. It's not a full skirt. It's just an apron to preserve the lady's modesty. The apron comes around and does up to a button on just at the back. When she goes to get on the saddle, the apron will come off, will come undone.
Like so. Here's my leg.
Again, you'll see Sue getting on astride. And this is ideally when the handsome gentleman helps her with her. It goes, we'll pull this up. It comes around under your knee. That comes on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Lift your head, comes under your knee. And goes up. Okay. It comes around under your leg. Okay, down. And it does up on a button on the underside of the apron to hold it down.
And often the bottom hem is weighted as well. That way you don't have a wardrobe malfunction in the middle of a ride. Your skirt won't jersey you.
Put your foot in the stirrup. Okay. The apron should go just to the seam of her boot, or the ankle seam of her boot. It should sit completely straight along the bottom, and no wrinkles. It should just lie directly straight across the bottom, and that's the way you wear a habit, an English riding habit. Sue today is wearing a vest, which the ladies would wear. This would be considered a formal attire.
Now this is for pretty, the top hat and the veil. Please always wear a helmet, and that is becoming quite common in the show ring, the ladies wearing helmets. But when you hop off to have your picture taken, definitely a top hat and a veil. And the veil is actually holding the hat on.
The veil holds the hat on, and it was also meant to preserve the lady's complexion while she was out hunting, in case she encountered branches or something on the trail. So you can see the way Sue's wearing the hat. It should just come down to your brow. It should be flat, straight, sitting straight from front to back. And the veil is very tight as a rule, and it comes back to the back of the hat, and it helps to keep the hat on. Now, while Sue is changing into the Western attire, one of our frequently asked questions is, do I use a saddle pad or blanket or something underneath underneath the saddle. There's been 2 camps for this for a very long time. Because these saddles were custom made for a certain horse and rider, we are now almost going to the thrift shop for these saddles. So there's going to be differences in the fit for the horse and the rider with these saddles now that we're using them. Ideally, I like just a thin pad underneath the saddle. It's got to be a no-slip pad. If you're going to use a saddle pad, it's got to be a no-slip pad. It also helps to keep the linen clean. The underside of these saddles are covered in linen to help keep the stuffing in place. So it helps when you use a light pad, but you must use a non-slip pad. There's many of them on the market right at the moment. Or if you don't need it, ideally you go without one. So we're back with the Western attire. Ideally, Western attire from your waist up to your head, it would be the same as an astride rider. With Western side saddle, we're looking at a Western apron. Now this apron is made of leather, but it doesn't have to be. And it's stylized to look like chaps at the top. And this one has fringe down the side. They can have conchos, they can have anything. But it's just the Western style. And again, this apron will come around and do up on the other side while the lady is on the ground walking around. Okay. So when you were thinking of picking out an outfit for your side saddle, in English, you can use a hacking jacket, and you can have a apron made to match the hacking jacket, usually in a contrasting color. If your hacking jacket or your navy jacket, navy tweed jacket is, we would put maybe a black apron or a navy apron with it. So it's not, you don't have to find a full habit in order to be dressed appropriately for either the show ring or the hunt field. For the most part, you can show just about any discipline you want. The only thing we suggest is that you call ahead to the show authorities, let them know that you're coming in with a side saddle. We can, as a rule, we give you a list of criteria for a side saddle rider that can be handed to the judge or a steward so they know what they should be looking for and that you're safe on the saddle. But for the most part, and any discipline can be done in a side saddle. In our dress department, this would be a Victorian outfit. This is sort of the epitome of side saddle and why so many ladies love to ride side saddle. This would be approximately late 1800s. Now we've made the full skirt into a safety skirt. It works the same as an apron, but it's long. It would cover the lady's feet on the saddle. It does up in front. She has lace on her hat to indicate wealth. She is using she has in her hand a Victorian lady's cane. It has a hook on the top that she could use if she's out hunting or out on a hack. If she has to open a gate, unlatch a gate, she can use the hook on the top of the cane. As you can see, it's lower. It's lower in the back. Puff sleeves. This would be you wouldn't show in this kind of outfit, but for demonstrations or just fancy dress, this would be the outfit you would show up in. Boots, our seminar on side saddle riding. We hope you've enjoyed it. Please reach out to us if you have any other questions.
Facebook, we're on Facebook.
And we'd like to thank the organization for inviting us to do this seminar. on Sidesaddle. We hope you've enjoyed it. Take care.
Bye.